Good afternoon or good morning, depending on what part of the world you're in. You're all very welcome to this latest update session on Enterprise and our new features we're about to release. My name is Rijke. I'm the head of go-to-market for Enterprise. As I mentioned in our last update on the latest Enterprise releases, there is a lot of stuff coming. So the guys have been extremely busy and more features are being added all the time. And I'm delighted, even just a few weeks later, to already be able to give you this newest session and run through some of the new features that are there. So there's quite a lot of stuff to go through. I fully appreciate with some of it, I might be touching on high level, but at any stage, if you have more questions about it, of course, get in touch with us. We'll be delighted to explain more to you. And we will also try and get more detailed material out to you in different formats so you get a better understanding as well. So what we're hoping to cover is basically all the new stuff that is in the forthcoming release. That release is literally due in the coming days. It might be really soon or even after this session, but you will see the notifications. And as always, it basically means that all these features will become available to you. So whether you're a SAP Business One user using Enterprise in conjunction with your application, whether you're a pure Enterprise user, etc., of course, these features will come up, and if it's on the mobile apps, it basically just means update your mobile app, or on the web, those new features will automatically be released and become available in the web application. So as I mentioned, a lot of stuff to go through, so I'm really hoping to crack through that. I'm going to start first off with service, and particularly the mobile service app on Android. As you might be familiar with, quite often what we do is we develop new features. We might bring it on the one platform like Android out first, usually then fairly quickly followed by, say, iOS, or vice versa, of course. But what I'll do is I'll talk you through the new features that have become available on Android in our service app. And hopefully in 1 second now you should be able to see that, and you'll be able to see my screen and the mobile device I have in my hand. So straight away, you'll probably notice a difference. There's a bit of a difference in look and feel. So a couple of things straight away. Of course, very much also brought forward by feedback that you provided to us. We made these further enhancements around usability and trying to basically bring better features to the end user on the road. So one is in a way quite straightforward, but it's a real good one because certainly for service engineers, it'll be a very common scenario. So you will still have, as you can see here, the different service calls in an overview that are actually assigned to me. So previously, this is very much how we worked on the app, is you go to your calendar, you pick a date, and you see the service calls. So what you have now, first of all, is a little bit of a new look and feel. One of the things you see straight away on the left-hand side is the time duration that comes through on those different calls. So for the time that they're scheduled, they're brought in here, and you can see that in the overview. I can see the ones that are assigned to me, but what I can now also do is look at any service calls that haven't been assigned yet. So you don't necessarily now need to wait for the scheduler anymore, as we used to do it on the web application, but actually on the mobile device, I can now also go into unassigned calls and pick up calls from the queue. So if you have a business that works on a queue-based system, or if your service engineer simply runs through the calls they needed to do for the day and they have still time left over, they can now start picking up these calls from a queue. So back to the assigned to me piece. As you can see, different service calls. One key thing though, and I've already turned it on here, I'll say it straight away, is one of the key differences is where before we used to pick a date, and let me just pick a date here, and same as before, if you go into the overview, at the bottom it will tell you how many service calls are found. Yeah. So I could pick the 24th and of course select that, but what I've done here is now use this feature which is at the bottom left, which is show all. Yeah. So it now actually shows me all the different dates, as you can see. So obviously that's already a key difference, so it makes it much more flexible how to work with the schedule and basically the calls, whether they're assigned or unassigned or not. One thing though that's very new as well, and from your last update, you might remember that this is something we had added to the expense app, and where I already mentioned, look, keep looking out for this feature, it's going to come in more apps, is basically this one. I really like this one, which is the analyze screen straight away at the start or as the home screen, basically for the mobile app. So what can we now see? Okay, calls overview. 2 assigned for me today, 143 assigned in total, 14 unassigned, etc., etc., pending, of course, on the date you select. Yeah, it shows me an overview of the calls closed in previous weeks and gives me a quick view of that. Average closure times, well, in this case, I haven't had these closed calls, but it then provides me and calculates out the difference. Yeah, and it shows me as well what was the average closure time in the previous month. So in that case, I can see what was 3 minutes. So straight away, again, we're given some more direct and informative details to the end user that's out on the road. So hopefully you agree with me, that's a real great usability enhancement that we've now provided to this as well. So again, the service calls I've shown you here, assigned, unassigned. What we now also have though is this additional one where you see a similar feed based on the activities. So for those of you that are familiar with this, of course we can basically work off not only off service calls but also off activities and activities that are related to service calls. If I go back to the service calls themselves and let me drill in to one of them, something additional to show as well is this quite neat feature. If you go down and you see here around my custom fields, we now have this opportunity that when you set up a bespoke, a custom field, or in Business One terms, a UDF, that you can actually indicate when they're to be used. So they're the pre and the post custom fields. But the whole idea is that we can drive users to provide the information when they start a call or the information when they finish a call. So obviously, if you can imagine, in lots of different service scenarios, that's very relevant. Not only the fact that we have these custom fields, we can capture additional information. You can link them to UDFs in Business One and bring that information back. But now you can actually also drive at what point you want them to enter this information. Is it information that they need to pick up or, for example, read at the start of a call, and what do you want them to capture at the closing of a call? So how that works and how that operates and how do you set that up, I'm going to show you really quickly because it's quite straightforward. So I think it's a real nifty feature to be able to use. Is if we go to our custom field setup and we go to our service, for example, and we map a custom field, what you can now see is, here you go, pre-service call or post-service call. What you can now set for that field, and that's then transported through to the mobile application. So again, it really enhances what you can now do with the service call features on Enterprise. A couple of other quick updates around this as well. One other feature we've brought into play is something we call Simple View. So if we're familiar with this overview, what we've also found is that we got quite a bit of feedback that there is quite a lot of business scenarios where people say, look, I want what's presented to my help desk or my service engineer to be quite straightforward. I don't want to give them, for example, the option to pick the job that they want, because they might do the easy job, but the one that's close to home first. I actually want to direct them when I do the scheduling, which ones they do. So once you do the schedule, instead of having this option, and as we know, where we can basically reconfigure the schedule by the engineer, we can now also provide what's called, in effect, a simple view. So all you need to do for that is, again, in our settings, there is now a new feature under the users, going into the user's authorizations, where, as you can see, we can now set what's called a simple service app. The whole idea behind that is that what will happen is they will simply get a service call presented at a time. So they go from one service call to the next service call to the next service call, not giving them the flexibility to start changing schedules or take the pick that they want to pick, but actually drive them in terms of the different calls or the different sequence that you schedule in the normal service scheduler. In addition to this as well, not only, of course, have we this, but what you'll find as well, there is also additional notifications now possible. So particularly on the close, etc., of the call, notifications are captured. We can, of course, now send a notification as well as in terms of email, etc., etc. So there's quite a lot of features that now really round off the solution. That's of course on top, as you might remember, in terms of previous updates, things like having the direct mashability and being able to place an order from the main warehouse or to deliver out parts out of the van and those kind of things. Yeah. Again, just to even scan through that and give you an overview of the different views we can present. And as you can see, while I have the different calls there, what we can then do is basically sequence those calls out. We have the email function, we can send updates, etc. So there's other bits and pieces as well, but I think some of those are really the key features that you'll now find in the Android service app. And again, keep a lookout as we will be updating the iOS service app as well. So related to that, as I mentioned, in the web application, it's mainly around the setup. So it's in the permissions piece, being able to set the simple service app for that user, and as well, as I mentioned, the bespoke fields, the fact that you can create this idea of a pre-service call and post-service call setup for a user-defined field. Another app, and on this one I can actually be quite brief, is the expense app. And in this case, I'm just talking about the expense app on Android. You might look at this and say it looks familiar. That's quite correct because I've shown you this, but I've shown you this on the iOS. So as of now, as the release is going to come out, we will now also have the same feature in terms of the analyze screen and other additional features now available on Android as well. So again, we have the overview and the setup around that. We have the overview of the outstanding elements within that app. We can see the history, approved and rejected. And of course, we can then also do the drafts, see the drafts, and then finally do the review and do the actual approvals on the expenses. Briefly then on purchasing. So again, this is Android purchasing. Oh, I beg your pardon. There's Android purchasing. Not a whole lot of changes, but a couple of things, but they do impact. So for those of you familiar with purchasing, set up a new document. And for example, let me just set up a new purchase order here. Select my organization because I am multi-company. Here we go. So a couple of new things here now. It's very much around the adding the products. First of all, look at the top right-hand corner, barcode scanning. So the scanner is implemented here now as well. Again, a feature I mentioned before, but that we're now extending to more and more of the apps. But the main thing now is when I add a product, as you can see here, basically I have a number of elements that I can do. So I can enter the quantity here. I can then finish, which brings me back to the main screen, or I can say continue, as I can then keep adding additional products to this order until I say, for example, let's take this one as well, and I say finish, which then you see brings me back into the main overview. So I can see all three lines are now available there. One of the things and the reason around it is as well is we probably start adding additional features around what you can do on the line items. So in terms of the lines themselves, I can of course see the stock information. You probably have seen this before, but just in case it's something you haven't discovered yet, by pressing on the info button. But what we can now also do is by simply pressing on the line, I can actually get into the details and edit the line. So everything in terms of price before discount, adding a discount, changing a quantity, etc., I can then edit for that product. So a couple of just straightforward features, but again, hopefully you agree with me, they're quite powerful and again help to create further usability on the application. Some basic and straightforward updates, so I can sort of more rattle them off fairly quickly. So particularly then around the apps and then the Android apps, so the likes of Find and Sell, Deliver, etc. You'll be delighted to see that these will now be available in Italian as well. So the languages are rolled out. Equally then, just to let you know in terms of updates, there is updates on the iOS apps of expenses, purchase, sell, etc. Mainly those fixes, there are a number of bug fixes in there, so have a look at the update. The bug fixes are listed there, and again, these have also been translated and also been available now in Italian. An additional element is something that we did already have available on Android Van Cell. We now in iOS Van Cell also have barcode scanning available. So again, using your camera, and actually as we saw here, similarly on iOS, we will now have the feature, you can use your camera, scan a barcode, which then directly recognizes the product. So again, around usability, handling of all these kind of apps that use stock or products in some shape or form, again, helps to make it more usable. Now, as I mentioned, this was sort of only the start because there's plenty of things to go through. So one big update, and this is particularly around Business One customers and partners that are obviously bringing out Enterprise. What we've originally now released, and it's particular relevance to people that have SAP Business One and that use Enterprise in conjunction, so for Business One. So one key, and I think you'll agree it's a pretty big feature, a key element that we now added to the setup is some of the details we can now capture in sales documents. And you'll see at the moment I start adding products to the line. So I can pick a product. Let me just pick anything here. Now you'll see a couple of things straight away. You can select a warehouse, a quantity. You see a new box here. I'll come back to that in 1 second. Price, discount, etc. And now we can start adding cost center and project code. So this is a standard SAP Business One financial project code to an order line. Whether it's an order line, whether it's a delivery, whether it's an invoice. So while we have those features already on the purchasing side, we've now also brought them in on the sales side. At the moment, these are specific for Business One. Structurally, they're there, but anybody that's a pure Enterprise Mobile One customer, for example, because we don't have the definition and the creation yet of those two master data items, there isn't the relevance for them yet. But of course, any Business One customer, no doubt you agree with me, these are very, very relevant. So what can I do here? The cost center is dimension 1, so I can pick one of my cost centers. If I predefined projects, I can pick a project code, and I now also have a comments box to say, please hurry up with this product, for example. So we have all of that. On top of that, as you can see here at the bottom, what we also show is based on either the selected warehouse or all warehouses, a basic overview of the stock information. So in stock, what's on sales order and what's available outside of that. We also have this feature. This is something I believe I've shown you before, where we can click add additional items. So where we go to the next product we want to add to the line, like you just saw on the mobile device on purchasing, or I can simply say OK. Now before I do that, I did promise to come back to this. So upload image. One of the updates I'll show you later is that you can now define images for your products. But in case you haven't defined an image for your product, if you upload an image here, it's an image just relevant to this order line. So again, the nice thing here now is it's not just a generic stock picture. This can be specific to this order for this line item. So for example, if you want to take a picture of something specifically on this customer's order, etc., you can now add that to the application here and put it on your order line. Outside of defining your project code and your cost center, what you still have, like we already did on the purchasing and expense app, you can also go in here and potentially then enter additional cost center dimensions that you want to use, all the way up to 5 dimensions. So the first one is the one you add with your item. We've on purpose left it on 1. A lot of people would just use one cost center, but you do have this ability to define additional ones. So what are some of the benefits around this? Well, particularly for SAP Business One customers, I nearly don't need to explain, but it's of course, around indicating this, the fact that it filters through on all your transactions. Now you have it on sales and on purchasing. So all this data can now come back into your SAP Business One system. You have all the power of cost center reporting there, doing financial reporting by project codes. So there's a whole variety of things that now become available to you. As it stands today, this is on the web initially only. But of course, like always, look, keep track of things here and see what further updates we bring out in the future. So I think the projects and cost centers are obviously a pretty biggie for any existing SAP Business One customers. Certainly in my years dealing with different projects, it's always been a feature that has been well loved, and particularly for partners, well used in being able to define specific reportings for customers and creating certain scenarios that allow very rich, for example, financial reporting in SAP Business One out of that. So all of that's now available, both on sales documents, also now on procurement, of course, and expenses where you already have it. Another new element that we have, again, it's one of those maybe straightforward ones, but it was probably for some people one that was sorely missed, is basically around payments. So what we now have is when we create a payment, and if I pick any customer, we now have a new option, and you'll see it here. It's basically your payment on account. So basically it's not a payment that is reconciled directly to any existing documents. It's purely on account for you to reconcile later, and it's purely to capture that. It's both in incoming and outgoing payments. We've now added that feature. Again, something that's very relevant for Business One customers only. The main reason for that is in for Business One, we then have that whole internal reconciliation that you can use to basically then offset that and then basically update the account. But then for Business One customers, it means that you can really utilize these screens for the simple processing on, say, a finance team around, receiving payments, people that do cash collections, etc., while leaving the richer functionality of Business One for, the accounting team or the more experienced team that would do things like account reconciliations, etc., etc. Okay, another new feature we have as well is around stock. Last time, hopefully you've seen it, we added a lot of new features in the whole stock arena. We talked about the stock, the goods received, the goods issued, the fact we now have the stock transfer, the piece where it's around doing the simple stock transfer option that's coming. We have the posting report as well. And just on simple stock transfer, just to show you that, of course I didn't have one here. But the key one, or a new one that we have now here, is what's called the stock valuation report. Now, again, as it stands today, initially we're releasing this for Business One only. So it is a simple stock valuation report. So let's be very clear on that. For those of you, particularly for the SAP Business One partners, basically what this derives is a similar functionality as what we call in SAP Business One the simulation report. Okay, and so what it basically does is when you look at your products, and hopefully I grab some good ones here, you pick a warehouse, and basically what we do is we simply run a simple stock valuation report against a set price list. Yeah? So it is like the simulation report in Business One. It's purely a simple stock feature. It won't be as comprehensive as in SAP Business One, but it does deliver basically the basis of being able to do a straightforward stock valuation. Further stock related, but now we're starting to talk a little bit more around control. So what we now also have is further again in authorization, where you can see we now have differentiated on the stock module and what people are able to see there. Yeah? So we have further info on that, being able to basically see what level of access they have to that. And I'll come back to that in a minute. There is further basically controls coming around stock as well. So again, it's something in terms of authorizations based on the feedback that we received from you. We now started to extend the functionality of what we make available. What you'll find as well is in the different areas, I already gave everybody a little preview of that last time, is that we start to get all these different analysis elements back in the application. So you'll start seeing these different views, particularly with our new layout of being able to get these sort of different dashboards, etc. So have a good look because you'll find more and more of them coming in, and every new release will show you more. Last time I already quite extensively talked about the service one, which is the first main one we drove out. And I kind of already mentioned at that time, but that is now coming to the live one, which is basically not only do we now have the analyzed dashboard, but we will also now release to the live this drill through capability so that based on those KPI overviews, you can now actually drill in. So not only, of course, does it give you the richness of the information, like know how many open calls there are, but actually being able then to action it by going into it. Yeah? Go into the 65 unassigned call. Yeah? See the 16 open service calls. Drill into the calls by particular queue, etc., etc. Another element I also mentioned in my last update as up and coming, again I'm delighted now to say that that's going to come out, is the idea, and by the way here you have again a little analyze screen as you can see by different area, but it's this element of the relationship map as we call it. So it's a simple one in Enterprise, but it's still powerful again to be able to trace your document. So I'm going to an invoice here. I can see, of course, so I'm cheating a little bit that it is based on another document, but it's this feature that I mentioned last time where now under actions I can see more information, and basically now if I click here I can see the related document and drill directly back to that document to see that information. So that is coming live now. Just some other neat things as well, by the way. One particularly for those of you that work with SAP Business One, what we now also show on the documents is the open quantity. So in other words, if there's a quantity outstanding, and here of course that's on the invoice, but let me then go to the correlating sales order, where I can now see my quantity was 2, but the open quantity here now is 0, because as you saw, I had moved it to invoice, the 2 were invoiced, so it's now closed off. So now you can basically see that open quantity field, and in particular, of course, when you're then looking for further information, etc., or you want to use the filter options that we have, again, you know, it's that additional benefit to see, you can look what's outstanding on the document, what's not outstanding, and all those kind of elements. One thing I do want to show you as well is, as we're adding more information, because I already showed you, you know, we're going to add cost centers now, we're going to add project codes, we now have an open quantity field. So of course, our real estate is starting to get a little bit pushed, as you can imagine. So one thing that we've done as well, very neatly, as you can see there, just by hovering over it, I can now see this further information down there, and being able to collapse and expand that as well, which I think is going to be a very powerful, quick piece as well, without sort of losing the real estate that we have. Still on the web browser, a couple of other elements where we've updates as well. So if I go to sales and, for example, or actually, sorry, the CRM, and I want to see my pipeline, let me just jump into this guy here. One new element, again, very simple feature, but very powerful in terms of usability. we now add the expected closing months as a filter option. So in other words, if I'm looking at my sales pipeline, I show all my stages. Yes, we can view by stage or by month, but if I want to see my stages, and for example say, well look, it's the latter stages I'm interested in, not all those kind of first, second meetings and all that kind of stuff, but now I'm keen to see, look, what am I closing? Yeah, what's currently on the books? Well, not looking too good for my company, but as I then start adding to it, there we go. Where's my thing? There's always a danger, as they say, when you play live, but it basically gives me the opportunity to filter by the closing month that's defined. I'll probably need to double check because obviously nobody's not using the feature yet. It means I probably have no closing months yet. But basically it allows me then straight away to filter and say, well, look, what do I have, for example, in negotiation and order, but is it to close for this month or is it to close for that month? Just in general terms, it's something that I had talked about as an upcoming feature. It's, again, a straightforward thing, but I know a lot of people were missing this and getting the full richness out of both those features, particularly because it's so CRM focused, is the addition of a lot of additional fields in the column chooser for both the opportunities grid overview as well as the activities grid overview, so the whole CRM area. So everything from the main contact person, expected closing date, the main address, the information source of the opportunity, the industry, etc. So the beauty of that is, of course, and when I start bringing that in here, I can now start doing filters, exporting for any reports, all that kind of stuff, which makes it much more powerful, as no doubt you'll agree. We have that on the opportunities. And equally, as I mentioned, that also now comes back on the activities. So when we look at the activities overview and we look at the columns there, again, you'll find additional columns, UDFs, etc., but also things like the standard fields. So for example, we had things like the main, I believe it was the main topic or activity type, but we also now have the subject, for example. Okay, one thing that I already briefly mentioned was the update on stock. I talked to you about it on the order lines, but it's the fact that, and as you can see it there, that we can now start adding products, editing products, I should say, and now start bringing in images. Yeah. So again, now it means per product, you can now drop in the images. So this is obviously our first step at this, but it allows you now to define these images on the products. And things we're looking at over time is, okay, in what other areas? So not only then on the web and on the orders there, but potentially then looking at, what are the possibilities around the mobile apps, etc., to bring those images back throughout the application. I know it's a feature that has been asked for quite a lot. So, we're very happy to be able to bring that. And don't forget, like I mentioned, you can set it for the product, but also on an individual order line, you can also add an image just for that order line. So hopefully I haven't tired anybody out too much because I know I'm throwing a fair bit of information at you all at the same go. A few more things to go, so don't worry, so bear with us. But hopefully you're still all soaking it up. So in terms of some other additional fields, the order lines I mentioned to you, that's it. The web expense setup. We just want to make you aware of this because it's going to look different. So particularly for partners that are obviously educating customers or customers that go back to the section, when you're now looking at your setup for your expenses, thank you. You do get a warning. Distance rate setting screens have been changed. Yeah. So basically what we've done is there is a change here in design. It's because we allow for a new feature, particularly to some jurisdictions where mileage is related to engine capacity. But what we've done on the same token is we have also kind of cleaned up the screen quite a bit. And as you'll find, it looks, particularly in terms of when you add a new expense type, it looks slightly different. So both in terms of edit you can see, we can go and add it there on the go, but also now when you press the plus, instead of getting this secondary screen that probably a lot of you are familiar with that was not fully user intuitive, we've hopefully now made this a bit more straightforward, where, as you can see, we can now sort of directly just create it into the line and set it up. There is some more sort of setup here now if you are in a jurisdiction where engine capacity does play a role. Because when we say add it here, you now see, particularly if you have engine capacities defined, we have these kind of different thresholds, what the engine capacity is, etc. We are bringing some educational material out on this. I believe a video is going to come out on this, so do bear with us. That will go into the specific detail of how this works. Once you get a head around it, you'll get it. And don't worry, if in your jurisdiction engine capacity doesn't play a role, that's fine, because it basically just takes one default and still just allows you to set up different thresholds. Keeps it simple for the rest. So obviously, again, that setup and the UI changed a little bit. We will bring out a video on it, but hopefully you agree with us that particularly for just adding new expense users and the setup of that we've made it a little bit easier and a little bit more straightforward. So a lot of talking and a lot of information thrown at you, and I haven't even started talking about what we call currently coding, so things that are coming. I'm not going to spend too much time on that today, but as we mentioned before, we're not stopping it. I know the guys are already flowing into sort of the whole next batch of new features and things that are coming. So a couple of things to mention to hopefully get you excited to come and join the next webinar that will hold on that. A big update that's coming is going to be all around Customer One. So for those of you that are not familiar with it, Customer One, what's that about? It's what we always call, it's for your customer's customer. It's where we provide this feature that if you set up your customers and you have self-service enabled, they basically, your main customer, if you're a partner or if you're a user, you basically can enable their contacts. Sorry, I just went about this the wrong way, typical. But you can enable their contacts to get access in a limited way to their data on your system. Now, it's mainly been to be able to view basic data, like around service calls, activities, etc., etc. There is a lot of new features coming on that. So I'm not even going to go through all of them. We're also going to bring it out in stages, but there's a lot of updates coming on that. We've been doing a lot of work on it, and please stay tuned. So, next time there's an update webinar, come and join us, because I think we'll be spending quite a bit of time on that. So here, that's the part I mentioned, that when you're in a customer's detail, you can create that self-service account. Well, what you can do with that, the guys are in the middle of doing it at the moment, but there's going to be a lot of features coming out on that. So please do join us when we talk about that. Another currently coding is as well, I already briefly mentioned it, it's around the whole stock module. As we've shown, there's quite a lot of new features that we've now brought out over the last little while. But what we're now doing as well, particularly based on some of your feedback, is we're adding further authorizations and setup around that. So again, that's coming. Two key other elements I'm going to mention for now. There's probably plenty more I can mention, but I think these two will also pick up attention from people. Again, currently coding. So currently coding basically means, we are putting it through our tests at the moment. The guys are fixing it, etc. But some of the elements that are going to be added. So we've already added serialized numbers for stock and for release of stock. Batch numbers is coming on the web as well. So I know we've talked about it before, but currently we're in the testing round and the final sort of development of that. So very much keep a lookout for batch related products and being able to release those from the web application initially only. Another element as well, particularly relevant for partners and wanting some flexibility, or also in this case for pure enterprise users, which is going to be the possibility to basically edit the GL account structure of your product groups. So the main element around that is, at the moment, the way we do that, it's kind of predefined and it picks it up, but you can't change it, not from Enterprise. So particularly for those who just use Enterprise and want more flexibility on how they, for example, analyze in their P&L, how to deal with different product groups, what the sales revenue account for each group is, is it different, what name does it have, what's the cost of sale account, etc., etc. We are now bringing out that feature, again, currently coding, so it's still in testing phase, etc., but we hope to bring it in a future release very soon, is the ability now to start amending that. So hopefully you agree, a lot of different elements, again, a lot of new updates. Hopefully we can now finally get the full benefit of the new Analyze screen. Again, keep an eye out. We're going to add more of these. We're going to get more richness on that. I'm quite keen as well to grab your attention back to the service one that I started off with. Again, it's now in effect the second app where we also add the whole Analyze feature. And where we now have this whole overview and I think a nice clean up about how the scheduling and everything is done. So do please stay in touch with us. Again, I'll open up the floor in a minute, but outside of that, always feel free to follow up with us, ask for the questions and those kind of things. This main release is literally due in the next short period. So, I've been told it's very imminent. So do keep an eye out. As usual, it'll be pushed out, updates on the mobile apps, and the web browser will go live, and you'll be able to avail of the new features. So thanks very much for listening to me and going through that whole rattle and long list of new updates. Again, we will hope to hold one again very soon in the next couple of weeks, and we'll keep you posted on the new developments that are going to come out in the next release. In the meantime, keep your eye out for this new stuff coming out, and we're always here to answer any further questions. And outside of that, please enjoy and make good use of it. Thanks very much.